Well, I'm joined now from Westminster by the Labour MP, Chris Williamson. Mr Williamson, if you had had the chance to have this debate before the military action in Syria, would Jeremy Corbyn have voted for military action? Would you?
Well, I wouldn't have voted for military action. I don't think it was a sensible thing to do. It certainly wasn't in the national interest, contrary to what the Prime Minister and many Tory MPs are claiming.
But well, you know, so if not now, when children are being gassed, then when?
Well, that's a debatable point as well, isn't it? And we've heard the former First Sea Lord, Lord West, questioning the validity of the assertions. The former commander of British Armed Forces in Iraq, similarly. So there are very eminent military experts who are questioning the motive and indeed the evidence. And I think before we commit troops or indeed before we agree to airstrikes, the very minimum I think we should have is irrefutable evidence, and I don't think we've got that. I think what we heard...
Well, how debatable is debatable? I mean, was the Duma attack, might it have been faked?
Well, what we've heard from the Prime Minister is the suggestion that they'd seen social media posts and hearsay. Now, clearly, if we're going to commit our forces, we should have better intelligence than that, it seems to me. We've been through the dodgy dossier which led to the disastrous war in Iraq, and we shouldn't be going round that route again, it seems to me.
Well, I'll come back to your hearsay point in a minute, but I just ask you again, could the Duma attack have been faked, in your view?
Well, listen, I'm not an expert, am I? It's all speculation. It's all speculation. All these parliamentarians are simply speculating. That's why we need irrefutable evidence. We know from Robert Fisk, a investigative journalist who's on the ground in Duma. He's spoken to doctors, he's spoken to people actually living there. And they're actually questioning whether indeed a gas attack took place. Clearly, look, the use of chemical weapons are absolutely appalling. And the whole war situation in Syria is dreadful and has been dragging on now for 7 years, and the human misery is beyond belief. But when we hear the Prime Minister talking about these airstrikes being a humanitarian mission, it reeks of hypocrisy, because when she was challenged to take more refugees who are living proof of the consequences of war, she refused to do so. That seems to me would be a more relevant humanitarian gesture rather than actually launching these airstrikes.
If a gas attack didn't take place, as you've just suggested or just floated,
well,
how do you explain those children with eyes streaming, gasping for breath? How do you explain that?
Well, what I'd recommend that you do, Cathy, is look at the report that was filed by Robert Fisk, and he spoke to the doctor. He said that they were suffering from hypoxia, basically a shortage of oxygen brought about by certainly military bombardment, which led to a huge dust cloud and a shortage of air. And people were suffering from the effects of that. This is what the doctor was saying on the ground. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm merely pointing out that there are question marks that have been raised by military experts, by people on the ground, by eyewitnesses, which seem to run counter to what the government is claiming.
Well, let's talk about what the government is claiming. Theresa May has claimed that a barrel bomb was used to deliver the chemicals. The regime helicopter was seen above Duma on the evening of April the 7th. Now, the Syrian opposition doesn't have barrel bombs or helicopters, and what's more, the Syrian government has a track record of chemical attacks. So wouldn't the Prime Minister be entitled to ask you, what more evidence do you want?
Well, again, it's hearsay, as I understand it, that the helicopter was heard overhead. And look, the use of barrel bombs, the use of all of these military hardware against the people in Syria, it's just dreadful. It's appalling, of course it is, and we deprecate it in the strongest possible terms.
But it's rather interesting, isn't it, that you're not prepared to listen to the hearsay of the Prime Minister, hearsay, your word, but you are prepared to listen to the hearsay of the journalist Robert Fisk?
Well, it's not hearsay, is it? I mean, he's actually on the ground, isn't he? I mean, what the Prime Minister has cited and Conservative MPs have cited, as I've already said, Cathy, is social media posts and assertions about a helicopter being overhead. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, I don't know, and there might very well have been a chemical weapons attack, but what Lord West, what the former First Sea Lord and General Shaw have said is that it beggars belief that Assad, at this stage of the civil war and the battle for eastern Ghouta, would resort to using chemical weapons. And I just think these are very serious question marks, and therefore merit, do they not, a debate in the House of Commons rather than the Prime Minister taking it upon herself to use the powers which certainly the Constitution currently provide for her to commit British military forces in the way in which she has.
Well, some of the
Surely before we do that, there
own...
should be a debate in the House of Commons.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, MPs are the people's representatives.
And
the
there has
people,
been
by
a
a margin
debate.
of 2 to 1, are
Mr. Williamson,
opposed.
there has been a debate, and your colleagues, Labour colleagues, have expressed the view that inaction of the sort that you advocate has allowed Assad, a murderous dictator, to be propped up in power. Are you content with that?
I'm not advocating inaction. What I'm advocating, and what I think the leader of the opposition, the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, is advocating, is that we use our good officers and rigorously pursue a diplomatic solution. Look, even Winston Churchill, the great war leader, said, "Jaw is better than war." Ultimately, there has to be a political solution to this terrible crisis that has befallen the people of Syria. And
Chris,
it would be better, would it not, to use our influence to get all of the players around the table to hammer out a negotiated settlement.
Chris Williamson, thank you very much.